It's that time again.
Yep. We are Team Wester.
And you are the most important thing to us.
Team Wester
Podcast. It's all about the team.
Welcome back to another edition of the Team Wester podcast. I'm Brad Gelber, and I'm joined today by a special co-host here, someone who's no stranger to Team Wester, Steve Tasker. Steve.
Hey Brad, thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Nice to be here.
You know, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to my normal co-host, Reed Ferguson. Obviously, a great season we had with him this year, a lot of good episodes. He's enjoying, I think, time with the family now in the off season, as these guys are entitled to do. So, hopefully we'll be able to run it back next season, but just wanted to give him a quick shout out for all the work he did this year. Steve, one thing I wanted to talk to you before we get into kind of the nitty gritty of obviously what occurred last week was just, something I was thinking about with knowing you were going to come on. I was thinking about kind of your career trajectory and being a player with this team for a long time at a high level. I think at some point you probably developed a fandom that went along with that once you were, obviously playing for the team, post playing in the team, but then you have this career as a broadcaster that you worked for CBS and now you do the radio show and everything. How do you balance those two things? Because, often you still have to be critical of the team, right? Because that's a component to your job, but you played for them for a long time and you get to know these guys on a different level. So how does that work for you?
My rule of thumb is just be honest. I acknowledge you could be wrong about what you see or whatever, but be honest about what you see and why you think it happens. Sure. And then I think, you can always defend it that way. Say, I believe this, and this. And if you really do believe in it and you're being honest, there's no reason to be critical. It's not that anybody out there is trying to fail or anybody out there is trying to play bad or anybody making a bad mistake. Sure. It's just the way life is, And so if you can just remember just to be honest with yourself and what you believe and what you know and justify it with your own beliefs and why you think what you do, it's pretty easy to tread that, to go back and forth between being a broadcaster, being critical. Plus, in a sports setting, if one guy is, if there's a play that happens and it goes against you, it doesn't mean you sting. The other guy made a superlative play, and you can always acknowledge that too. Mm-hmm. Listen, you don't play in a vacuum, particularly in the NFL. Right. So, there's always somebody out there playing really well, and you can always talk about that without going into why, he was successful against this guy or that guy. So there's always a way to make it compelling to listen to and to be entertaining without, crushing somebody's soul.
Sure. That makes sense. Secondarily, obviously during your time with the Bills, you had a lot of success and those 90s teams had a lot of success. But, I think one of the things that people talk a lot about is not being able to win the Super Bowl, getting there 4 times, sure. not getting over the hump. Similarly, not that they've made it to the Super Bowl, but these teams of late have had quite a bit of success throughout the regular season and winning the division and getting to the playoffs, and then have had some success, at least in the wild card round. And now this season, the divisional round. When you are a player for these teams and you're feeling like you can get very far, but maybe just not all the way, how do you overcome that? Or where do these guys go from there to be able to pick themselves back up and say, all right, we're gonna try again next year?
The tendency is always to think that everything's wrong if you keep getting stopped at the exact same point every year, and it's really not the case. I mean, you have to remember, even if you keep trying to do the exact same thing over and over and expect different results in this kind of atmosphere that you're in the NFL, nothing's the same year over year. Mm-hmm. Not only are you going to be different, even if you're trying to do everything exactly the same, you're vastly different than you were a year before. And even if the other team is the same way, and they're vastly different as well. So the trick of it is to keep doing and using your process to get to where you want to be and taking a better swing. Yep. No denying that even this last year, where the Bills got put out in the AFC Championship game by the Chiefs, it's the same team that put them out 3 years before that. Now it's four in a row. Now it's 5 in a row, whatever it is. It's different every year. Every game is, and these teams are very close every single time. So you start to think that there's some fundamental thing that is wrong when actuality is you just got to play well on that day. The Bills, you could tell you, most of them would tell you they didn't play as well as they played in the regular season. And when you lose by that much, that's what it takes, all it takes. The Bills and the Chiefs are virtually identical, but the Chiefs have, quarterback and some key players and a head coach and stuff that seem to have the edge in those close games. They proved it this year in those one-score games. They were 12-0.
Right.
Going into the Super Bowl. So it's in their DNA, and it's something you got to try and get around. The Bills have done it in the regular season on a regular basis. But, in the games where if you lose, your season's over, they have not been able to perform like they have in other times. And I think that's a hurdle you got to get over. And it's not something where you have to do everything different or anything different. Yeah. But on that day, when the game falls your way, you got to make sure that you're ready for it.
Yeah. That kind of leads me into the next one here. Just kind of like overall thoughts on that game. You already kind of hinted at it. But
that game, it was exactly what we expected, right? You knew it was going to come down to a possession or two at the end of the game. I was really happy. The Bills got off to a very slow start.
Yep.
And climbed back in it before halftime, and then, of course, took the lead in the third quarter. They showed why they deserved to be there, no question about it. But the Chiefs also just showed why they're two-time defending world champions. They answered, and the Bills were on the verge of answering, and they're the spot of the ball or a shoestring tackle, and things go differently. And it is really frustratingly, after months and months of practicing and going, and all the fans and the teams, and it all comes down to a couple of plays that if they go the other way, you think that the outcome would have been much different.
Right.
And I hate to say it that way, but that's kind of what we sign up for. Yeah. And certainly the Chiefs have had more than their share of moments like that have gone their way.
Sure.
But there's something in the fact about their personality, about their quarterback, about Travis Kelce. They're great players, and even their role players, where they're able to make that happen when other teams can't.
Yeah, and it's almost like you do this for a living, because you kind of set me up perfectly for the next question here. Was some of those controversial calls, two of the ones I think maybe that stand out to people was the Josh Allen run that was marked short of the first down, and then another big play that maybe didn't get as much talk about because there was a penalty on it that kind of negated it regardless, but was the Xavier Worthy catch that looked like maybe it was intercepted or it hit the ground and it was ruled a catch and whatever. So some of those key moments, like you already indicated, that went against the Bills in those moments. Kind of what was your thoughts, I guess, especially on the run? Was when you were watching, were you seeing it one way, or what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I thought the Worthy catch was not a catch.
Yep.
And I thought Josh got the first down.
Yep.
That's two of those plays, sure. And I thought the third down play before Josh had to run the fourth and short, I thought Kincaid had gotten the first down. And there's my take on that has always been this. Certainly there are plays in every game that are questionable, and then where they didn't quite get it right, or they spotted the ball a few inches off or a foot off or whatever it is, and didn't misspotted the ball. What people have to remember is the NFL goes to great pains to keeping the playing field level for all teams. For the last place team picks first in the draft. The last place teams, if a player comes up over waivers, the worst teams get their first pick of the guys that teams are with. So parity is a huge aspect of why the league is so good and so competitive. It also comes down to the salary cap, so that a team like Green Bay, who's a very small market, and so can compete with a team like New York and LA and Houston and Chicago and all the big cities, like Buffalo, like New Orleans and Jacksonville. They can compete on a level playing field financially in the big picture with the rest of the teams in the league. That's huge. So the league is very level and extremely competitive. Lots of their games come down to one possession.
Yeah, that's true.
When every game or most of the games come down to one possession, you have to make a decision, a philosophical decision as the league and as fans. Do you want the officials to call the penalties?
Right.
Or do you want to let them play?
Right.
And if you let them play, it's going to be whoever cheats best who wins.
Right.
And if you're going to call the penalties, you're going to if they call it right, that's fine. But if they call it right and it's just barely a penalty, is it a ticky-tack call? It's like, no, you got to let them play. Well, if you let them play, it's who cheats best.
Yeah.
And if you don't, so when you get down to these single possession games, it's very close. How involved do you want the officials to be? Do you want them to call the penalties? And I think what the league wants and what the coaches and players want, just call it the same at the end of the game as you did in the beginning, and consistent. That's hard to do for an NFL official, because players at the end of the game, when the stakes are the highest and the game is on the line in one play, the official really doesn't want, as a human being, you don't want to insert yourself into that.
No.
And there's been, time after time after time over the years, different guys where you'd think, well, that should have been a penalty, and the official doesn't insert himself, and it's like, you got to live with it.
Right.
So you're always going to have these moments in a league that is as competitive as the NFL, where the officials either are involved, too involved, or not involved enough.
Yep.
And in every case, 2 of those 3 are wrong.
Yep. It's true. What about your thoughts on there's been some talk about maybe leveraging technology, right? So we see it in tennis. There's the ball spotting. They can do that. There's been some tests done with being able to, in that moment where Josh crosses, you lose the view essentially. But with technology, perhaps they can spot that better. Do you support the league moving in that direction, or do you think having that kind of human error still adds to the game a little bit?
If they can make it accurate, make it accurate.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody fears that. And I think the league, if it comes to the point where they can do that, they will. Mm-hmm. The league, over the course of the decades of its existence, well over 100 now, they've gotten every single issue, every challenge that has faced them, they've gotten it right.
Yeah.
Now, it takes a long time sometimes.
Sure.
It took a long time for replay review. It took a long time for that. It took, but they do get it right.
Yeah.
And so you can bet they're going to get this right too. When the technology gets close and when they can rely on it, they may well implement it. Mm-hmm. But it takes a while. And there's also a fairness factor where they have 32 stadiums. Not quite 32 because a couple of teams play in the same. Yeah. There's 30 stadiums, and every stadium has to be outfitted with that technology. It has to be the same for all the games wherever they are. Even now, replay officials and the eye in the sky. For a game like the Super Bowl, they'll have a couple of hundred cameras. Yep. For a game in the regular season, the early games, and it's the last game of the thing, the number 6 game for a network or whatever, they'll have 8 or 16 cameras.
Right.
And they just don't have enough angles or the access to that. So fair is fair.
Yep.
And so that's something they have to address as well. But for the sake of spotting the ball, electronic, it's long been anticipated, but you can't use the technology used in tennis.
Sure.
Because there's 9,000 guys standing between the camera and the ball where the ball hits the line. There's nobody on the tennis court. It's empty except for 2 guys standing off the end lines. In football, there's 22 guys, 6 of which may be between the camera and the ball.
Yep.
That's the problem.
Sure.
And, you have to address that, and the technology's got to catch up to that. And right now, I don't think they're there yet.
Yeah. Something that has been talked about a bit, and not by any stretch, I think we all know, but, they talk about how the Bills passed on Patrick Mahomes, right? And the next year they get Josh Allen. Similarly, there was some talk of why didn't they take Xavier Worthy? They passed, on him. The Chiefs moved up and got him, and then they ended up with Keon Coleman. It's very easy to debate that, whether you can't pluck a player's success and put him on another team and expect it would be exactly the same.
Right.
Same with Mahomes at the time. If he had come to the Bills, it was a totally different coaching situation and support around him. Who knows how that would have gone.
Right.
Similarly, though, Xavier Worthy did develop quite nicely as the season went on. He had a couple big plays versus the Bills. How do you balance that criticism, of you keep passing on these guys that the Chiefs seem to make work, and then you're giving your rival the success, basically.
Yeah, and I get it. You don't want to help the team you're actually trying to beat. But like I said, you're trying to make your team as good as you can make. Nobody cares in Buffalo Stadium or in the Raiders Stadium or the Chargers or any of these other teams. Nobody cares about that. They're trying to build their team up, and that's what the Bills are trying to do. And it would be interesting to see what Xavier Worthy would have done as a Buffalo Bill this year, because they had this mantra of everybody eats.
Yep.
And Keon Coleman was going to get a certain number of targets because it was spread out over a larger number of people. In Kansas City, that was kind of an empty room, and they needed Xavier Worthy to do it, because then Rashee Rice also went down for Kansas City, who was their number 1 guy at the end of last year. And now Xavier Worthy they had to feed him opportunities. And certainly young players, that's really what they want, is the opportunity to just be a part of it. Keon Coleman could have had, much bigger numbers if he would have been with an offense that would have plugged him in and thrown him the ball a lot more.
Right.
But nobody was going to get those opportunities in Buffalo because they spread them out to a bunch of different guys. So it is a little bit of apples to oranges where you get these guys, and I get the idea that you trade you trade that draft pick to a guy who turns into a person who helps beat you.
Yeah.
But the Bills are and always will be an organization just like every other organization. Because the Bills have different draft picks than the Chiefs have. Different numbers, different number of picks, different spot in the draft, different needs. They're trying to get the most out of their picks and their needs and their opportunities and their free agent market and their budget.
Right.
And they're trying to get as many good players as they can and then go in and see if they can find enough different ways to win to beat all the teams in the league, Chiefs included. So that's kind of the atmosphere in the league. It's not about beating one, not all 31 teams or whatever are trying to beat the world champion that year. They're trying to win their division. They're trying to beat for the Bills, they're trying to beat the Dolphins, the Patriots, and the Jets. And while those teams are down at the current moment, it still starts there.
Sure.
And then you find ways during the regular season to beat every team that you can and and if you can find enough talent, you can beat anybody. And the Bills have been there, and they've proven it. They beat the number one seeds in both conferences this year, and they beat the Chiefs. So it's that's what you're doing. You're trying to beat everybody and trying to find as many different ways to win as you can because you have to play a lot of different teams.
So something else, I wanted to get your thoughts on was because we saw a lot of success throughout the regular season, not just from the Bills, but Josh Allen specifically, but the tush push or whatever you want to call it. Every team has a different name for it, right? So Baltimore uses Mark Andrews, but it's a similar sort of thing. Jalen Hurts in Philly, they do it. Josh has been very successful in this sort of run. He's a big guy. It's hard to stop him. The offensive line's really good. Kansas City seemed to have the most success we've seen in a while against that.
Sure.
But the Bills seem to not want to move away from it. So I know that part of it is sticking with what's worked for you, and then there's also have to be this nuance of like adapting to what's happening in the game. What were your thoughts on kind of that happening throughout where they just seemingly were able to stop it, but the Bills seemed committed to continuing to try it?
Yeah, well, here's the thing. I don't ever have a problem putting the ball in the hands of Josh and having him win it. That's always been a good recipe. And I think that's where the Bills were at. Give it to your best player, and with the best offensive line, and let them do it. Certainly, the Chiefs knew that and had a plan for it, and were good. And even with a frozen field, it kind of aided the Chiefs a little bit in that as well. But also, I certainly, when you get into situations like this where you don't win the game, obviously you go back and you should have done everything different,
sure.
right?
Yep.
So. I think when you look at it from the other end, think about this: if the Bills would have gotten cute and not done that
Everyone
missed, you're right back to the same, and you would have garnered even more criticism, because you got too cute. Just push it forward. What are you doing?
Right.
So yeah, it's one of those things where the one thing doesn't work, so you should have done the other.
Sure.
I get it, and certainly you got to tip your hat to the Chiefs for stopping a play that had been hugely successful throughout the season. And the Bills have played many different teams, many different fronts, many different types of defensive alignment, and it worked against everything. And the Chiefs, gave a superlative effort and got it done better than the Bills were able to. And that's, you got to tip your hat to them. And particularly that there are those who say it should have worked anyway.
Sure.
And it did work anyway, but we got, the spot. So what are you going to do then?
Right.
So what do? You don't need to fix anything then.
Right.
It's not your, right? So if you subscribe to the spot of the ball.
Sure.
So, yeah, I don't have a problem putting the ball in the hands of your best player in any situation. I think that's what the Bills were committed to doing.
Secondarily to that, one guy that seemed to have a ton of success in that game early was James Cook. It seemed like he was kind of tearing the Chiefs up. And it seemed like as the game went on, at least he wasn't in at all for that final drive there. I know there was some talk of him possibly having sustained an injury on the sideline. It looked like he was trying to work through it. If it's as simple as it was an injury, then there's nothing you can do. But, what was kind of your thoughts on him not being in there late in the game?
I got to be honest, I was watching. I didn't notice him not being in there because when Ty Johnson's in there, I don't have any problem with it either. Ty Johnson's a better pass protector, and I think that played into some of it. I think James Cook, teams try to take advantage of a poor pass protector when they're in there. They'll send an extra guy. So I think the Bills were part of it was putting Ty Johnson in, knowing that the Chiefs knew he could pass protect.
Sure.
So they might hesitate to send extra people. Also, throughout the regular season and playoffs, Josh has told everybody who would listen that Ty Johnson's the best third down back in the league anyway. Yep. So they want him out there in certain situations above James. Yep. So all of that goes into the mix there. And certainly the running game, the way it was working early in the third quarter, if you want to go back and say, well, what's the problem? Why didn't they continue to do that? That's a good question. If they had gotten to the point where the running game was such that they were getting predictable with James Cook was in the game and they were going to hand it off to him, that could have been a problem for the Chiefs to, and their defense to say, all right, we're just going to sell out, stop the run, and then put them in a must-pass situation anyway. Yep. There's a little bit of that going on as well. So I have always been, as a broadcaster, hesitant to criticize why teams do what they do. As you said, I don't know that there's not an injury to James Cook. I don't know that when James Cook was in there, the Chiefs were sending a guy to make him pass protect, knowing he was not as good as Ty Johnson. And even if you put two guys in there at once, well, then you got to take somebody off the field. Yep. So all of that goes into the mix, and I'm very hesitant to criticize a coaching staff for the guys they have on the field, because of all those ingredients in the mix that you just don't know.
Totally, yeah. As watching it on TV, we see one little piece of it. We don't get the whole.
Right, you see the one guy's not in, and you don't know why.
Right.
And so you have to say, well, they're just idiots for not putting the guy in.
Right.
And there's, like I said, all those ingredients that go into that decision.
Something I thought was really interesting, too, is actually hearing from the players on both the Bills and former Kansas City players talking about plays that were run by the Chiefs that they had never seen before, or moments where they utilized one thing that they typically don't. So I believe Greg Rousseau and a couple of guys were speaking to not being familiar with Mahomes running in some of those situational moments, like the touchdown he ran in.
It's not something they'd done too much of this year, if at all. Now, they did go back, and some of the plays they had seen, certainly they'd seen other teams run them.
Lamar did it, I believe, the week before the exact kind of similar plays.
So they'll run, but that's not something you've seen Pat Mahomes do. And plus, they would run some of their stuff that you had seen at times during the season from different personnel and different formations. And I think that's kind of what you're looking at. When you see the players are going, the stuff they didn't expect. And that's kudos too. As part of being a good coaching staff, no question, is bringing stuff like that up out of it. But it's also part of the benefit of having 2 weeks before the wild card round or before the divisional round to start working on the teams you may face in the AFC Championship, and to go in and say, okay, let's put a couple of things in there that they may not expect. And then, of course, knowing late in the game, you've kind of roll them out, and there they are. So, and they're successful. We wouldn't have heard about any of this
if they didn't win. Right?
Yes, if they didn't win. So that, I think, happens in a lot more games than we hear about, because the team that got caught guessing still won the game.
Similarly, there was some talk from the Bills' offensive line that Spagnuolo kind of perhaps was waiting, almost setting up kind of the pressure on that final play at the end, how he was looking to send the blitz but would back off and maybe send the corners instead. And then on the actual last play, they did bring the blitz, which kind of the way they explained it was they maybe shifted the other way, not thinking they were going to bring the blitz. So again, is that just that nuance of a coach knowing when it's the right time to call
there's
something?
Certainly an art form to it, and Steve Spagnuolo is very good at it. I think it was difficult to, in that moment, I think it was difficult for him to get on the same page because of the noise, because of the home environment for the Chiefs. I think there's a little bit of that going on as well. And also, just not recognizing it. You got kudos to the players for executing that exactly like they wanted to. I think that was a gotcha play, and the Chiefs got them. And let's face it, they're a foot away from getting got. So it was really close. And also, too, if they do step the right way, not only is that play successful, it's a big play. And it's one of those plays, you can tip your hat to them for the defensive call on a crucial down like that, and winning the game on it.
And I know you said earlier you don't like to call out players for the sake of calling out players and that, but in that moment, rewatching it, do you think that was kind of a situation where Kincaid should have had that ball, or is it something where it was more difficult?
Yeah, of course it was a hard catch, but even Kincaid will tell you it was a catch you want to try and make. You're going to be pushed to your limits in a game like that. Josh, the ball was wobbling when it came out. He threw it off his back foot, falling down. Every player on the team was stretched to their absolute limits. So was the Kansas City defense. Think about it. They didn't get to Josh. He got rid of the ball, and it was, finger quotes, catchable. So that's, everybody on the field was at the razor's edge of breaking, and the ball, and Dalton got two hands on it or one hand on it. It was
right there.
So that's how close all those matchups with the Bills and Chiefs have been. Even in the regular season, when it goes the Bills' way, right down to the playoffs when it seems to go the Chiefs' way, they're all right there, and that's why we can't not watch.
Totally. As we kind of wrap up on the Kansas City game, then I want to talk a little bit about just what's next for this team. But in this sort of era of Patrick Mahomes, kind of calling it the Mahomes era, some talking back to maybe even the 90s, right? You think about the NBA, it was like Michael Jordan's time. There was a lot of really good players that played basketball, but you could not get past Michael Jordan. Similarly, Tom Brady's era. There was a lot of good teams, good quarterbacks, but it was Brady's era. Does it kind of feel like we're in Mahomes' era right now with this team, where it's like you can have a generational player in Josh Allen, but it's just for some reason that guy in that team that it's hard to get past?
Kind of, yes.
We are in that era.
Yeah, I mean, it's historic. They've been to 7 straight AFC Championship games. They're the only team in history to go to 3 straight, to win 2 straight and go to a third. There's no doubt that they're playing at a level for longer than we've seen anybody play, and getting to the Super Bowl and more times in a row and winning it than anybody we've ever seen. It's really difficult to do. So this is a special historic era in the NFL with Pat and Andy Reid and Travis and Chris Jones and those guys, Trent McDuffie. They've got some fantastic players. They've got a coaching staff that has had some continuity now, and there's no question that everybody in the league is kind of like looking at those guys going, man, because you really can't quantify why they're different.
Right.
You can only look at the results and say there must be something different. Even for those Michael Jordan teams and the Bulls of the 90s, it's like, it's the guy, they point to Michael Jordan's competitive nature, his just
killer
not
instinct,
accepting anything and forcing his players to surround him and elevating them, even, antagonistically.
Sure.
So that's kind of where you're at with the Chiefs. You kind of point at things that you can't quantify, their attitude, their poise, stuff like that. And call it what you want. Yeah, it is a special era in the league when you've got a guy like Pat Mahomes, and certainly Bills fans are sitting here like we saw Tom Brady do it too, so we know it's possible to go, and be that good for that long. And there's no question that Pat's one of those special guys.
Does at some point, kind of what you said, it's almost this like intangible of like you can't quite put context or your finger on it. Does it become at some point for a team like the Bills, and I know you said every season's different, that's how you have to kind of approach it mentally, but does it become more of like a mental thing versus a physical thing when you're like, okay, here we go again, it's the Chiefs, I know it's a different team, but it's back in Kansas City, it's Pat Mahomes, it's Andy Reid. At some point, does it have to be this mental hurdle to overcome more than just a physical one, or no? Do we look
it's a little bit of that. I mean, it's also in football, the physical hurdle is always there.
Yep.
You always have to do that. Even if it was the Baltimore Ravens, they've got that hurdle physically. You got to go in and you got to play well. And mentally, it's part of being a pro football player and pro athlete. The mental part is always there as well. You have to get in and stay in the right frame of mind to compete at your highest level, and that's really the challenge. If you can compete at your highest level, you'll take the results and not even be unhappy about it. That's the Bills have been in that a couple of times, and so this last time in 2025 now, early January 2025, I don't think this last AFC Championship game, they lost by 3 points. It was a nail-biter, but you think the Bills would probably think we should have played a little better than we did.
Yep.
So that's the challenge. It's mental. The physical challenge is always there, so is the mental challenge, but the challenge isn't to overcome the Chiefs. It's to play your best in those moments. And that's the challenge that Pat and those guys and the Chiefs seem to have mastered.
Yeah. And one thing I think, you mentioned the noise late in the game, or we could look at the Bills record at home this season, undefeated.
Sure.
Does that speak to why it is just so important to try and finally get that 1 seed? Because I know they lost to Kansas City at home last year, which that's a different season, but there is that nuance of having that opportunity to play at home for the whole playoff stretch and have it go through Buffalo.
And you get the bye week as well,
Yep.
which is huge. That's a goal you need to set when you start out. Yep. Certainly, the big goal is winning the Super Bowl, but you start with increment. You want to win your division, you get home field advantage would be huge, and then go on from there. That's the way it has always been, and you set small, reachable, attainable goals that you can control in the near future, and then go from there. So there's nothing wrong with saying you got to get the 1 seed, particularly with a team like Kansas City, who has been so difficult to beat in their own building. That's certainly a realistic goal and an aspiration to shoot for. But early on whether you're going to get there or not.
Sure.
I mean, if you can see how the season's going. When they go out to 11-0.
Yep.
It's hard to catch them.
Right. In terms of kind of the last thing here, just wanted to run by you. So there has become maybe this misconception around Sean McDermott not being able to kind of win the big game because of some of the things we talked about. Joe Brady got a lot of praise this season for the success of the offense. He's a finalist, I believe, for assistant coach of the year. Seeing the coaching staff, what it's comprised of right now, obviously that can change in an offseason. Some guys leave, whatnot. But do you feel like they have the guys in place to take that step with? Because I think we it's revisionist history a little bit. It gets frustrating for fans,
Sure.
but that doesn't mean they're not the right guys to get the job done.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think they have built a really strong organization. They do so much exactly right. And I think one of the reason I like Sean so much, and I have a lot of respect for him and his staff, and the environment and the culture they've built at One Bills Drive, is that they help each player individually flourish.
Sure.
Every guy in there is his own guy, and they're helping give him what he needs to flourish inside the building and on the football field,
Sure.
And in his personal life, and they work hard at that, and that's why their rosters tend to overperform from what expectations were. Remember, they were supposed to finish third in the AFC East this year, and not only did they not finish third, they wrapped up the division earlier in record time. Right, so.
True.
Certainly that the Jets and the Dolphins had something to say about that because they went up in flames.
Sure.
But that's how this culture has worked and that's why I think they got to keep on keeping on. They are there every year taking a swing at it, and certainly Pat Mahomes and the Chiefs are going to be there until they're not, and you may have to go through them every year. But man, oh man, this is a team that is respected, and when the schedules come out, nobody circles that team and says it's a W for them,
right.
until they play it.
Sure.
They're just too good year in, year out, and even when they have a down year defensively, they overcome it by getting turnovers.
Yep.
When they can't run the ball, it doesn't matter because Josh is throwing for 41 touchdowns. That kind of stuff. So it's they find ways to win the games and get the most out of the guys in their locker room because they help them flourish personally and professionally and on the field, and that's not many teams can do that.
Sure. Moving on now, like we kind of said, you got to kind of reset. You got to start over. You got to take that next step into next season. I know it's probably different for every player and how they do that. But what was your kind of how did you always take that next step to move on from the prior season? Do you go on vacation? Do you watch the Super Bowl? Do you not watch the Super Bowl?
You do heal up. You do heal up, and it's a bummer. I mean, you just got to get your mind around it, and once you've gone a lap around the people you care about and in your inner circle, and your family and all your friends and your close friends, the people you interact with, and you kind of get a chance to rinse through their opinion and listen to them, talk to them, get through it with your groups, then you can kind of take a deep breath and say, okay. And then I think for players, it's much easier to turn the page because they can do something tangible to get ready for the next one.
Sure.
They start training, you start talking to your friend, talk to your coaches, and you start working towards it. And that's when it's easier for the players because they can do something tangibly to make a difference for the next time.
Right.
And that helps a lot.
For sure. One thing to the Pro Bowl, I know it's maybe changed quite a bit since like your time in the league here. It's basically, a skills competition flag football game now, but they've shifted how things are done. I know Deion Dawkins is there. I believe James Cook's there. Connor McGovern, a couple of players from the Bills are down there. What are your thoughts on kind of the Pro Bowl now? Do you like kind of that they've tried to shift some of it to be entertaining, or is it kind of lost its luster? I know we have fourth string kind of guys or fourth selected guys there at this point. A lot of guys opt out.
It is a nod to how difficult it is to play.
Yep.
Nobody wants to play a game.
Yep.
At all.
True.
And back in the day we did. We went out and we
played hard.
We hit hard. We played hard.
Yeah.
But over the years it became like, what are you doing?
Right.
When you get all that. And so I think it's a struggle. I think it's at some point it should become just part of the NFL honors.
Yeah.
And they don't need to go down and have a week somewhere and do all this, boondoggle.
Yeah.
It's fine. They do. They give them something. They should give the players something.
Sure.
But for me, and if there's no reason to have a game like we used to have. I got injured in Pro Bowls too. So it's the way it goes. Yeah. It was a hard game to play in, just like every other game. But now I think, just give them the award, have a get together, some kind of like an NFL honors or whatever, and move on. That way you won't have guys saying no thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. So give them something that entices them to come take part. But you don't have a skills competition, flag football. Nobody, come on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it. One other thing too, I didn't put this on here, but just thinking through what you were saying with NFL honors, is it pretty much a foregone conclusion when kind of you hear how the AP votes on how the MVP is going to go? Because I know a lot of people felt like it's kind of been already assumed it's going to be Lamar Jackson because of the way the first team AP versus Josh not getting that. Is that kind of how you see it too? Usually?
I don't know. I don't know. I'm going to look back at how it has worked in the past. Is the AP guy always...
It's the same people, I believe, that vote.
Yeah, is it always that guy who gets it? I don't know. It may be. And if it is, whatever, that's fine. They're both great players. And that's the way it goes. I'm sure Josh would take the win in the playoffs, and Lamar would give it to him.
Sure,
would take the win rather than the MVP. And give Josh the MVP if it came to that. And both of them would do that. But that's the way it goes. So I'm not sure if it's a foregone conclusion, but both these guys are really deserving. Lamar's a fantastic player, and he's unique. Josh is an absolute sea monster at quarterback, man. He's like a 50-foot python.
Yep.
He's just unbelievable. So they're both, every team in the league almost would take him over the guy they've got.
Right.
It's a short list of teams who wouldn't. Maybe a list of one or two, maybe. Yep. So, it's who knows who's going to get the MVP, but certainly both guys are deserving.
For sure. Next up, I guess, for most fans kind of get excited about is the draft. I'm not going to ask you super in-depth draft questions. I don't even know if you've had time to start looking into the draft at all, but do you kind of in your head have an idea of who you think perhaps, not who, but what maybe position groups the Bills need to look at?
Yeah, for me, the draft for the Bills especially, and I think for most teams like the Bills who are in these final 4 or final 8 teams, free agency is more fun and interesting than the draft is. Picking 30th is okay.
What it is. Yeah.
Last year they traded out of it and got down, picked the first pick of the second round was Keon.
Yep.
Fun, good pick, and it's good, but they're 5. He's the 5th wide receiver off the board,
right.
and even if they would have stayed and kept, and taken Xavier Worthy at 28, it's like. He still would have been in this offense with 6 other guys catching touchdown passes and all that.
Sure.
to get a real difference maker, you got to be inside the top 5.
Yeah, totally.
You know,
Yep.
and in this draft, it's supposed to be even more exaggerated than that. Maybe there might only be 6 or 7 guys out there who could do it.
Yep.
So the draft is great. It'll be fun. It'll be interesting to see which guys we can. But notoriously, rookies have struggled to impact this team.
Yep.
The only one who did in a big way have been the guys on the offensive line.
Yep.
Osiris Torrance, Spencer Brown, Dion,
Yep.
those kind of guys. The guys up front, even defensive linemen, we got Greg Rousseau, Ed Oliver, AJ Epinesa, first or second round picks. Those guys are really good pros.
Right.
But
Took a while.
But it took a while. And, they haven't been as a Miles Garrett type of player or one of those top 5 guys, right?
Yep.
So, or an Aaron Donald or somebody like that.
Right.
So, for the Bills, as good as they play in the regular season, the draft is about getting contributors, not dominators. And and I'm much more interested in see the kind of guys they sign in free agency, because then you can go back and look at what they do here, what they do there, what kind of guys. So you got a better thermometer of how good that guy can be in a pros because you've seen him.
Yep. And speaking of free agency, actually, Brandon Beane kind of said he doesn't see them being super aggressive. However, they do have cap space that opens up this year.
Sure.
That, last year was kind of the reason people maybe thought it would be a transition year, because they didn't have that money. So not asking you if you believe Brandon or not. I know it's not his job to be transparent with us, but do you see the Bills? Obviously, they're going to spend what they have to spend, but being active in free agency?
Active enough. They got to sign some guys.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'll see a big splash. I would think if they're going to do something like that, it would be more of a trade situation rather than a free agent signing.
Yeah.
That I'd be interested in hearing about if there are teams out there with players who are available, coaching changes around the league, philosophies change, needs change. Yeah. This guy becomes expendable. It would be financially beneficial if they trade the guy, that kind of stuff. You could see that happening. And if the Bills do want to partake in free agency, certainly they could jump through some financial hoops to make that happen. Yeah. I'd take him at his word. Unless something comes up that is unforeseen, they would probably stick to what he said and say, we'll just sign the regular guys we do, some middle-of-the-road guys, and we'll try to get mileage out of them, like we did with Mac Hollins this year.
Right.
Guys that
value.
And like we did with Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, guys that most of us didn't know who they were, but all of a sudden it's like, wow.
Yeah.
That kind of
mainstay. Yep.
I would continue to think we're going to get guys like that.
Yeah. Last thing here, because you've been gracious with your time with me today. Last year, I think going into the season, I asked you, you might not remember this, but we did an interview here for the Team West Herr stuff, and I asked you kind of one of the reasons to be optimistic for this coming season. A lot of people were kind of, like I said then, not really giving us the benefit of the doubt. It was going to be a transition year, like you said, finishing third in the division type of thing. And I remember you told me, because it stuck with me, don't worry about the offense. We lost Diggs, we lost some guys. They're going to figure it out. I know we got to focus on how the defense does. That's what you said to me last year, and you were right, because the offense found their way.
Right.
What is the reason to be optimistic? Is it just Josh Allen and the story, no matter
what? It's
what?
kind of the same thing this year. Certainly, they proved they could do it with different faces on the edge. Their offensive line is coming back, and it's going to be just the same guys plus some really quality guys behind them. Their offensive line has a chance to be dominant again this year. So you can bet the running backs are going to flourish, and the running game will be there just like it was this year, and Josh will be able to work wonders behind it with another year under Keon's belt. Khalil Shakir is going to be back. The tight ends are going to be back. So they're going to be really good offensively again. Defensively, I think you can expect another round of player turnover because of contracts out and stuff like that. And I think they want to get probably a little bit more athletic and a little bit more speedy in the back end of that defense as well. So I think that's something that you can count on happening. And I think they'll probably focus on that side of the ball, probably in free agency and the draft. Yeah.
Well, Steve, I want to thank you again for taking the time here. It was great to talk some football with you. I think it's tough anytime we get to this time of year, because we all so badly want this to be the year where things go 100% right. But still thankful for such a fun season with so much success, maybe when people didn't expect it. But hopefully we'll have to have people stay tuned to next year as it'll come back around, and we'll continue to do the Team Wester podcast in the off season. We'll focus on maybe a little different than just football, because there's not football all year round, but there'll be plenty to talk about, a lot of community initiatives, things going on at Wester. But for Steve Tasker, I'm Brad Gelber, and thank you for watching the Team Wester podcast. We'll catch you again real soon.